If someone were to tell me before I started reading this series that, Laura, you're gonna love this so much that you're gonna want to buy personal copies for your collection, I would have been extremely skeptical, y'all. Very doubtful, but that's exactly what happened. Hello friends, happy Friday. So excited for this video review. I am continuing to review and read the manga that you guys voted for and that won in my shoujo event. Check out the video here if you're curious about all of the winners, how everything went down. Last week I reviewed Sand Chronicles, which won for first place. I already did the review. This week I am going to be doing, it is currently a 9-volume series. It is ongoing, and that is Kakuriyo Bed and Breakfast for Spirits. Oh my goodness, y'all. I have to say sorry. I have to apologize because I mentioned in that shoujo video wrapping up everything, saying the winners, I mentioned that I tried this series at some point and I just didn't connect with it. I don't know what happened at that time. I don't remember even when I read it or tried it at that time. But y'all, I really felt like when I started this, I was very skeptical. I was like, I really don't think I'm gonna like this. I'm not familiar with Japanese folklore or yokai. I don't really even read anything with yokai. And so I was skeptical, and I should have not been. I should have been more trusting of y'all, and y'all recommending, voting for this series. Obviously it won, so, and we got second place, so obviously it's good. People have read it, they love it, that's why it won, they voted for it. But I was really doubtful, and I feel so bad because I loved it so incredibly much, like more so than I ever imagined, than I ever thought I would. I mean, I sold off manga, earlier this week, and I was like, hey, I was honest. I said, hey, I want to buy my own copy because all of these, except for volumes 8 and 9, I borrowed from my library. Thank you guys for buying some of the manga volumes I was selling, because I was in fact able to order my own set, and so when these return to the library, I can read them anytime. I feel very confident that I'm going to be coming back and rereading this series again at some point. Rather than just keep holding the manga stack there, let me go ahead and tell you what this manga is about, in case if you're not familiar with it. It is about our main girl here. She's way back there. Her name is Aoi. I believe I'm saying that right, and do bear with me. Some of these names were hard to say, and I do have a funny, I guess maybe a funny joke about later on. But she is a human girl. She lives in Japan. Her grandfather has passed away, and the thing is though, is she can see these spirits. Let me see if I can say it, y'all, because every time I see it, I always think of Bokuto saying Akashi, and I'm like, it ain't, no, I'm like, this is not the character. Aya Akashi, and that just is another word for yokai, or the Japanese term. And so she can see these spirits though. She has been feeding them food so they don't devour her, as her grandfather Shiro taught her. But when he passes away, she meets this guy here who is an ogre, and his name is Odana. She meets him, and she is kidnapped, taken to Kakuriyo, the spiritual realm, the spiritual world, and he tells her, hey, your grandfather owes us a huge debt, and as collateral, he basically agreed, signed a contract more or less. I mean, I don't think he signed physically anything, but he agreed that he would give one of his granddaughters to this ogre to marry them, to waive and pass, get rid of the debt. Well, our main girl is like, no, I'm not gonna marry you. I don't care how powerful you are in Kakuriyo. I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna go find a job in Kakuriyo and pay off the debt myself. The thing is though, because she's a human, and humans are so rare in this world, that nobody wants to hire her. Nobody likes her. Everybody thinks she's outlandish because they're like, why would you not marry the Odana? He is a great and powerful, spirit. And she's just like, no, I'm gonna do things my own way. And so it's the beginning of her journey in this spiritual realm place of finding her footing, yes, but cooking so much delicious food. Oh my goodness, so much food. There were so many times when I was reading this, I would get super sleepy, and I'm like, why am I getting sleepy? Only to realize I was fighting back hunger so I could keep reading. So I'd have to stop reading so I could go eat something and be able to return and focus back on the series, because this is very much a foodie manga. I'm actually really shocked that people don't say this is a foodie manga, and maybe I haven't read a lot of cooking manga, but I feel like where we have numerous chapters, like in each volume, you will have at least one chapter fully centered around Aoi cooking. And I'm like, why has nobody promoted this as a food manga? Because I really feel like it is. The food always looks delicious. She's walking through the recipes of how she's making things. And while it doesn't in some food manga I've read where it gives you an actual recipe, like in the cook-off spin-off of Witch Hat Atelier, did hear that one actually has cooking recipes that you can actually follow and make it for yourself. So it doesn't have that in this sense where it doesn't give you like how many grams to use or, you know, like what to do in the sense of like an actual step-by-step, but she's describing very in-depth of what she's doing, of how she's cooking this food. And I just was hungry so often when I was reading that I really had to time when I'm like, okay, either I read this when I'm actually eating lunch or eating breakfast or something, or I read this right after I have eaten something, because going in before I've eaten anything, it was a deal breaker. I could not eat. I couldn't focus at all. So I definitely learned my lesson in that sense, but it was wonderful. Like, there was not a bad volume in this manga. I really love the characters, and I honestly feel like if you're not here for the food, you are ultimately here for the characters. You're ultimately here to get to know them, to see how our main girl is growing and how she is just loving, maybe not loving, but I feel like she's come to really love these people, these other spirits, these yokai that she's met. And even though she was very weary of them at first, she really starts to care for them. And it's so great because one way that she shows that she cares for them is by cooking them this amazing food. It is so wonderful to see how she really gets to know people. I'm trying to think of, I feel like there's some kind of like food saying about, you know, the way, I know they've said about men or whatever, like that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. And I guess that could be true for this in the sense of friendship. She makes so many great friendships because she decides to cook them a meal, and how that meal touches that person, especially if she's just making it because, say, that they're feeling down or something bad has happened to them, like they lost a job or they're worried about this person from their past showing up again. Honestly, Aoi, she always takes the time to cook a long meal, majority of the time, like appetizer, the main meal, and then dessert. She takes the time to cook all these things, but then she also takes the time to genuinely listen to these people, what are going on in their lives, what their problems are, if they choose to open up. And that was going back to what I was trying to say earlier. That is one of the most rewarding parts of this series, is because in the beginning, you see how much she is struggling, how nobody wants anything to do with her. In fact, there's somebody that tries to hurt her and injure her to get rid of her, more or less. And seeing how you have relationships like that, I guess you would say, where it's just danger and there is no, that person does not like Aoi at all. It would be like a 0% chance. Only for the series to go on and you see how they're looking out for her, how they're giving her, say, advice, or how they purposely just seek her out to talk to her. It was great. I really, really loved that. And I just felt so many warm feelings when I was reading in almost any volume, because it's a really chill series, though there were at least 2 volumes where something dangerous really happens. And I was like, okay, this is really intense for this series because we haven't had anything like this. We're cooking food, we're getting to know people, and bam, suddenly our main girl's life is on the line. Like, what? Like, what just happened? Very, very good, very compelling, though those moments are far and few between. So if you're looking very much for a chill manga, this is a great one to read because I really feel like there's just not that much high of stakes. Now, I do feel like at the beginning, you do feel how high the stakes are for our main girl, and that if she does not marry the Adana, things are going to be very bad for her, and she's really forced into this marriage that she just absolutely doesn't want. And that's definitely one thing I really loved about her character, and was really shocked how much depth she had. I think I had a different perspective or different idea or view of what I thought this series would be, and that it was just this young teenage girl who's been kidnapped. She's gonna be, you know, around these spirits, and they're going to entice her more or less, and she's like, oh, I love it, I want to stay here forever because I'm in love with this hot guy. No. I don't know where I got that idea from, but I was so wrong. She is in college. I think she's in her 2nd year. She has such a great head on her shoulders, and she's like, I have been told not to trust yokai at all, and I'm not just going to suddenly marry this man just because I have my grandfather's debt hanging over my head and she never knew about for all of these years. Not only that, but she's really, in the beginning, she's working through her grief of her grandfather, and I love the questions that she's asking of, how did my grandfather feel about me? Did he really love me? I mean, he taught me all of these these things. He seemed to super care for me, but why would he basically make me the collateral to waive his debt and not have to worry about in his lifetime? But even outside of those things, and definitely Kakuriyo, her grandfather had a really horrible, I am blanking on the word. I keep saying representation. That is not the right word that I'm looking for. It's similar to that though, but a really bad rep. People did not like him, and when they heard his name, there were characters who got super angry. This guy right here is a prime example. He got so angry whenever Shiro came up, and there's other characters that felt very similar. So she has all of this hatred towards her just because she's the granddaughter of this man that caused so much havoc. It was chaos. There's multiple moments, multiple stories where she finds out like, wow, he was not the grandfather I thought he was. And like, even though she knew some of his tendencies and whatnot, she still was very surprised when she heard these things. But I bring all of that up because you really feel the stakes in that moment of where she really doesn't want to be forced into this marriage, and she's going to just do everything in her power to make sure it doesn't happen. To be determined though, if she is going to marry the Odana. And it's very interesting because I love romance. I adore it. It's amazing. And just like with Sand Chronicles though, romance is not the main plot. It's not the main focus. And that's very true for this series. And I was just very surprised that because it doesn't have that romantic focus, that I was like, I'm cool. I'm okay. Does that mean that I don't want to see them together? No, that ain't true, because I do. There were more moments as the series goes on where we see the Odana and her together, and I love it. I ship them. They are great. The Odana is an amazing character, and I've really loved how he has been this whole series. But I felt like the stakes, you feel them very much at the beginning, but later on the stakes don't feel quite the same. It sort of mellows out, but like in a good way, except for the occasional moment where we definitely have it. This is one of the volumes, I think this was the volume, where something really bad happens, and I feel like our main girl really shows her strength as a human, because more often than not, everybody's like, man, you're so frail for a human, and she's like, no, I'm strong for a human. And she really does show after the incident happens, where her life is literally on the line, like she could have died, that she shows her inner strength and how she keeps persevering. And this is another series, I feel like, I can't remember, oh, Sacrificial Princess and the King of Beasts. I do have a review up on this channel, but I really love that one because I feel like Sarifa, she has so much prejudice towards her. There's a lot of injustices that are being done towards her and the human people, and definitely the same could be said about humans treating the beasts unkindly. But for Sarifa specifically, she never let that prejudice really plague her, in the sense that she did not view the beast any differently. She treated them how she would anybody else. And I feel like Aoi is the same, especially after the incident that happens, that when she had every right, now not saying she wasn't angry, because she was, but when she had every right to really just be mean and say that she hated these people, she did not do that. And I admired her actions and how she acted because of that. When she, like I said, she had every right. Nobody's gonna fault her. Even the spirits are like, we would not fault you if you hate this guy, that you want them to be gone. She doesn't act on that. She doesn't even think that. So it wasn't just something like she was trying to cover up and make herself look good with her actions. No, she genuinely felt that internally in her mind, that she did not hate this character, or characters, I should say. I mean, yes, she's still angry at them, but I admired her so much for that when she had this moment where she could have just totally changed her view of all these characters, of all these people, but she didn't. She did not. She is an incredible heroine. I loved her strength. I love her food. This volume was so much fun because it introduced bread to so many characters, and their reactions were just gold. I was like, their love for bread, I'm like, yes, I too love bread. Bread is amazing. So thankful we have it. So it was just really cool seeing my love for bread and how people were reacting, like, this bread is amazing. Her food looks so good. I would love the chance to try her food. I mean, it would be delicious. No doubt. I mean, she's so creative with the dishes that she makes. I really enjoyed seeing, because she ends up running this restaurant, and it was so wonderful. I keep using that word. It was so fantastic to see the different dishes that she would come up with and the inspiration, and how she would put so much thought, even into like simple dishes. She still put so much thought into the things that she was making. And though the like other characters would be like, you know, you have your own spiritual power and that's coming naturally into the food, I honestly feel like some of it just came from a love for cooking and a love for maybe not that person per se, but a love for wanting to see this person cheer up, to see them have a brighter attitude. I really feel like she just put all of her heart into it, and it just showed so much of, like I said earlier, of like when these people started eating her food and how they would open up and they were more honest with their feelings. And I love when like she's honest, they're honest. It was so good. I love seeing when there was just so much more honesty, even if it was sometimes like a little bit meaner of how it was said. I still really always enjoyed it. These last 2 volumes, oh my goodness, they were really good. But look how short they are. They were so short. It makes me a little bit sad because I feel like when you compare it to the beginning of this series, like you can see, let me just hold up one. You could see how chunky this one is. This had like a good chunk. But then when you go to like volume 8, the chunkiness is just not as chunky, which was okay. I will say, like when it came to the writing itself, it was very good. But I thought it interesting when it came to the chapters, especially as we got further in this series, I felt like the chapters would just end. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that's like a bad thing. What I mean is like, okay, I feel like when you think of some, or I'll say majority of series, so it's not like a specific manga, but overall, majority of the time, you will have a manga and that chapter specifically will almost end like on a cliffhanger where you know there's more to the story that's going to come next. And so you're eagerly anticipating to read the next chapter because you're like, oh, this just ended sort of like on a cliffhanger and I need to know what happens. Not just at the end of the volume, but in every chapter. With this series, the closer we got to the end, sometimes I didn't feel like it ended on that cliffhanger. Like this chapter specifically, Aoi has been chatting with this one character and she's like, hey, so, and she just cooked her a meal. She's like, go ahead and try it. I'll cook the main dish while you eat that. And that's where it ended. That's where the chapter ended. And then it would go into the next one. Then she would start cooking. Again, I didn't have a problem with this, but I just thought it interesting because I feel like I don't see manga in the chapters like that. So it made me curious of how this is published in the magazine and if it ended that way. Because I feel like if I was reading this in a magazine, say monthly, I feel like it'd be harder for me not to come back because I'm already going to pre-order volume 10. I'm going to pre-order more volumes. I'm deeply invested. But I just feel like I would feel differently if that makes sense. And I didn't expect to notice that at all. And I'm so sad. I will just say right now, it is 9 volumes. They're out currently. Volume 10 doesn't come out till March of next year. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That is such a long wait. And I definitely got a little bit emotional when I finished this volume and I wrote my review because I'm like, I'm caught up. I'm caught up. I'm like, what do? I feel like I was really battling some anxiety earlier this week and I read volumes 1 through 4 and then I just didn't read anything for like 2 days and I had to push myself to come back into the series, not because it was bad or anything like that. I loved it up to that point, but the anxiety that I was having in my brain, feeling really anxious, made it harder for me to focus on anything. I was bouncing all over the place, trying to find something to occupy my mind, but I wasn't sticking anything. So I finally was like, you know what? Just read the series for crying out loud. Just come back to it. You're going to be okay. I'm so glad I did because honestly, this series was so comforting. I just felt like I was sort of like pulled down to earth, like, hey, breathe, relax, go eat something, breathe and relax. Everything's going to be okay. Like I just felt a deep comforting sense. And I really feel like it just helped ground me and remind me to breathe. It was honestly the perfect time for me to read this series because it was so down to earth, so comforting and calming. And it was wonderful in every single way. There wasn't one volume that I like disliked. Yes, there were some other volumes I didn't super love as much as others, but all of them were great, fantastic. I mean, you're really here, you're showing up for these characters and to see their interactions because I feel like there's a plot, but ultimately it's character driven. It's not a plot driven story. It has different things that happen in there and things happen to the characters, but ultimately it's the characters going to different places, doing different things. And that is what you're seeing. That is what you're here for. The one thing that I was like, we're going to do for this manga review is I'm like, we're just going to talk about the characters that are on the covers. Like that is what I'm here for. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I know I already talked about Aoi and how great she was. Will say that Genji here on the cover of volume 2, be still in my heart. I loved his character. Definitely one of my favorite characters in this entire series. I've already looked up merch and I did find one of him. It's like digital, so you got to print it. And I'm like, I might cave and do it because I loved him so much. I loved how caring he was, how funny he was, and how there were definitely moments where he was very mischievous. And there was one conversation that he has with another character. Aoi comments, she's like, they have pale skin, pale hair, but they're so black-hearted, they're so cold-hearted because they were going to plan an accident to a set of characters. I was like, you know, it's moments moments like those, I remember that you're a yokai, buddy, and that you have that mischievous side to you. I love when he's in his different forms, so this is my favorite. But overall, he is just so sweet and so kind, and I love his friendship slash relationship with Aoi. Honestly, the ending of volume 9, like that end chapter in that one, I loved it. It was the perfect way to like close out of what I have read because they were just so heartfelt in expressing their emotions. I loved it so much. They are just, their friendship is my favorite. They are like best duos, and I love seeing moments with them when they were like getting lectured and got in trouble together by another character. I really love the expressions that they make. Honestly, how they're just in this whole cooking thing together because he does help. He's really honestly the only spirit at the time who was helping Aoi and get, you know, a business started, doing something where she can start making money and start paying off this debt. He was the only one who was helping her at the beginning. He's the only one who gave her food at the beginning. That friendship just keeps growing, and I loved it so much. I love his character. He's so amazing. And I was like, we need more merch of him. I would love to have merch of him in my collection because he's so great. So he was definitely one of my favorite characters. Now, talking of Odana, I would never say he was like one of my least favorite characters, but I didn't feel like a strong pull or attachment to him in the beginning. But as the series went on, you see how he has so much respect for Aoi, and how he even says at one point, because he lets her go somewhere, he lets her go off of the inn, off the premise, his assistant, he's not the assistant, what is his name? I forget what his role title is specifically, but he is in charge of finances, and he's also sort of like the left-hand man to a degree. But he's like, why did you let her go if you don't want her to? And he's like, well, am I going to keep her in a cage? He's like, no, I'm going to let her have her freedoms and do what she would like, long as she's careful. And I was just like, oh, Donna, I was like, come on. I was like, he may have all of these, like, for being an ogre, I feel like where our main girl has heard, like, they're really mean, they're really scary. I feel like he does not live up to that. I feel like he doesn't. He's so kind, and everybody has such glowing things to say about him. And I feel like just the respect that he has for Aoi, and respecting that she doesn't want to marry him, even though he like drops these comments about, what, I just want to spend some time with my bride, is that, or my future bride, is that okay? And she's like, I'm not going to comment on that. Like, he never pushes past those lines. He respects her so very much. And you definitely see a variety of moments where people have shared about how Odana took them in and gave them a place to stay, gave them food to eat, and gave them a job ultimately, and how much they look up to him and want to do their jobs well because they don't want to disappoint him. He's a really amazing character, an incredible male lead when it comes to love interest. I was just increasingly more impressed with the things he would say and how he's just not rushing her. He supports her, and it's funny because I'm like, you know how to get into her heart, because he'll like give her food and bring her really good dishes or take her out to places that have really good dishes, and her face just glows and lights up whenever they go out to eat somewhere or he brings her food. I'm like, you know, I know what you're doing, you know, and she's just so happy about it, and it's really great seeing those moments. And they definitely have some moments where it's almost like a date and they're spending more time together, because as much as Aoi is like, I'm not gonna marry him, I'm not gonna be an ogre's bride, I'm like, I really think you care more about him than you ultimately realize. Because I'm like, there's, I almost said spoiler, but I'm like, there's things that happen, and I'm like, why would you say that? Why would you do that? I'm like, yeah, I think you really care for him, and you're really questioning it because he's so caring to her. Again, he's just ultimately super respectful. I'm like, it would be hard, I feel like, for her not to, even if she doesn't feel like a physical attraction towards him, I do think she just cares for his well-being, and it's more than just a friend or something. I feel like there's really something there because she asks questions about him at times, more so than she does, say, like Genji, who I feel like would be sort of like her best friend. So I'm here for it. I'm hoping we get more of those moments. There's things supposed to happen, I think, in volume 10 that I'm really looking forward to, and I'm so amazed just how far he's come, in the sense, didn't feel a lot of emotional feelings towards him. Then at the end, I'm like, yes, I'm excited to see him on page, excited to see what he will do next. He's a great character. All the characters are really great, but I was really, really impressed. And I talked about Genji. Oh my gosh, this character here. I had to go look up his name because it always takes me a moment to think about how to say it, and that's Byakuya. I think it's how you say his name. Hopefully, like I said, I know the characters' faces, but remembering their names has been a little bit of a struggle, I'll be honest. But he was really funny. Him as a character is not super funny majority of the time, but when these two were involved, it was super funny. And just the way he comes across, like, I think the creator did an amazing job, or like the artist and whatnot did such a great job with him, because he comes off this one way in this volume, and then either in volume 5 or 6 we see another side of him. It was so cute. It was so cute. It was like the perfect thing I needed to not feel a strong dislike towards his character or anything, because I viewed him completely differently. I'm like, okay, he doesn't have a heart of stone like I thought, where he's just mean and he's just chewing out everybody. Like, no, he was so much different than I anticipate him to be. I really, really liked him though, because he's one of those characters that's not afraid to make hard decisions because he knows that's what needs to be done. And I'm like, I admire you, buddy, because I am not like that at all, but he is very much like that, and he's not afraid to be savage, which could definitely create some interesting things that happen, especially in this volume going to the next one. I'm like, oh man, but he's great. I really loved when we see him on page, and I definitely hope we see more of him because it was just so great. After that one moment, that one incident where we see the other side of him, I was sold. I was stuck for him. Like, come on the page, but I want to see you and see what happens next. This girl, we only see her once. I do not remember her name, and she honestly doesn't say much, but I want to know who she is. So I feel like I will insert here. I feel like the story is great, but one thing that's so interesting is that there's like a subtle mystery that's woven in through each volume, where Aoi is realizing things like, something doesn't seem right, or she has questions about something. Great example is that we meet this character, we meet her very briefly, she gives something to Aoi, and we find out something about this character, and then she doesn't come up again. I mean, maybe like briefly during one scene, but that's it. And then in volume 9, we see something of her. And I was like, okay, what is this? What does all this mean? Why is this here? And so I feel like occasionally happen in every volume where there's just this subtle hint of mystery that honestly leaves you wanting to come back to the series and read more volumes just because you want to know the answer to that question. And so I'm definitely hoping that question gets answered very soon. I'm hoping we see this character again, because despite that we didn't see much of her, I thought she was cool. I'm just like, are we going to see her again though? So hopefully at some point we do in fact see her again. I'm trying to find, oh my goodness, this guy here. His name is Satori. When I read this volume, I did not like him. I'm not even lying. I was like, I don't trust this dude. He's causing problems. I don't like how the other characters that I do love and I do like, how they're acting, how they feel really nervous and gloomy. Like, no, that guy has to go. That guy has to go. But then I got into volume 9. He reminds me so much of Oikawa from Haikyuu, and I was like, I'm sold. I'm absolutely smitten with this guy. I hope he comes back. Well, I mean, he's still there, but like, I hope we see more of him again, because I was like, even though he acted really superficial, and I'm like, I don't trust him either, because Aoi mentions that she doesn't trust him. I was like, I feel the same way, but I really liked him because he reminded me of Oikawa, and even his hair is very similar, but the way he acts and what his personality seems, I am very, very intrigued. He was a very interesting character. I didn't expect to like him as much as I did. I mean, when I started out my review for volume 9, I was like, I like his character. I want to see more of it because it was just very different. And I feel like this was a great time too, where you're seeing more history of the characters, because I feel like you get to know everybody, and there's times where you'll get like these backstories. Is she on the back? You're like, of this lady here, where we got a really heavy backstory, like not in a bad way, but a heavy backstory of her. It really broke my heart. Like, I didn't realize how much of a burden is on her shoulders and what she's carrying and what she's thinking and why she's acting and doing what she's doing. It was very, very interesting because I feel like we didn't see a lot of backstories in the beginning. I mean, you do see, I feel like as the series goes on, like you do see some of the backstories for certain characters. Like this guy right here, his name is Akatsuki, I believe. I loved him. His character development in the series has been everything. He is so funny. I always blank on the names, but he's one of those characters, really grumpy, really prickly, but has this heart of gold and can be super caring, but he brushes it off, where he's like, no, I'm not like that. But he really is deep down. This was one of my favorite volumes because these two had a lot of page time together and they act like siblings. And I am just so here for it because they're just fun together on page, especially how he acts and how grumpy he acts. It's really, really good. It's really fun. I just loved him. I loved him in this volume and really enjoyed getting to know him as a character and see more into his backstory, because he had a very interesting, not view of Shiro, but his interactions with Shiro was very, very different than a lot of the other characters. And so I did appreciate that and like that. And I was trying to find, there is one guy. Yes, he's right here. He is one of the security guards in the series. And he's like the only one that openly admits that he really admired Shiro in the way that Shiro lived and the way that he acted. It was shocking because nobody nobody has said that they admire him by any means. And he was such a cutie. I thought he was a really fun character, and just really how Aoi looks at him like a little brother and sort of takes him in under her wing. Yes, here he is. His name is Sasuke. Look at him. I really, really liked him. He was sort of leery of her, but the way that they have sort of two, I feel like sort of like a sister-brother relationship, it's really great. I really liked him a lot. So I was happy to see him on page, I sort of don't want to say these characters because I don't want to spoil those. So, but that would be all of the characters from the front covers, I mean, but I loved this series so much. And thank you so much to all of the people who voted for it. Like I said, I really never expected to love it as much as I did, but I'm very sad. I'm caught up and have to wait so many months for the next volume, but I'm eagerly looking forward to it. As soon as it goes on sale, I'm going to be pre-ordering it ASAP. I want it. I want to see what happens next because these characters have been so comforting and just reassuring to me this week, and I've loved seeing the friendships just play out and everybody grow closer together, and how they come to Aoi's restaurant to have food at the end of the day and just talk with her and just enjoy time together. It is so very wonderful, and I would highly recommend this series to those who like food manga, who like seeing great friendships form and the Japanese folklore woven into the story. And I don't feel like you have to be familiar with the Japanese folklore. They do have notes at the end, so definitely help the newbie like me, because see, end notes, that definitely help people like me. I loved it so much. It's very, very wonderful. Would highly recommend checking it out. I would love to know, have you read this manga? Have you seen the anime? Who are some of your favorite characters? Are you looking forward to the next volume? What are we going to do in the meantime? What are we going to do in the meantime? But if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. Bye!